All right. All right, welcome to another edition of Zero Block 30. Today we are going to do a little bit something different. Cons and I for years have talked about we're huge Band of Brother heads. We've gone deep dive. Cons has written a blog series about each one of the episodes there. If you haven't seen it, it's good. I hate to admit anything Cons does is good, but that's a good series that
it was.
That's the barometer. That's the barometer.
Right.
When chaps will actually admit that it was good,
yeah,
then
I
you
think
know it was actually pretty legit.
That might be a first, honestly.
I was not going to admit that it was good, but I did read them all.
Yeah. I read them all too, and Cons would text them all to me, and I wouldn't respond to his texts just out of spite. And I did enjoy them, begrudgingly. I did enjoy them.
All right, so we've all watched Band of Brothers. So to set the scene a little bit, we got Nicky Smokes here, White Sox Dave, we got Barstool Chief, and we got Cons and myself. We're going to talk a little bit about Masters of the Air. I know you're a big World War II head and that you were super excited about this. I came in and I was like, Dave, did you watch it? He was like, I watched them twice. I watched both of them twice. Nick, we'll start with you, Nick. Did you like Band of Brothers? Did you see it?
I loved. Do I sound weird in the mic?
Yeah, it sounded a little
It
hot.
did?
Move it back a little bit. There you go.
Well, I love the show that we just watched. What was it? Master of the Air.
Yeah.
Master of the Air. And it's kind of weird because we were talking about it before the show started that when he was 25, he was in Iraq. And I'm assuming like those guys were going through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just sitting here in the office and I'm writing fucking blogs and talking on podcasts. And these guys are like defending our country. So there's just a lot of shit that goes into it I don't know. It's crazy to me that that's actually like what happens in war.
And it's strange when you're in, you don't think of yourself as being crazy young. Like you think of yourself as being a full-ass adult. You're ready to go to war. Like think about that one scene whenever they're on the flight line. And they're like, this dude's the best air chief we got. And he's 19 years old. Like coming in and figuring out all those things. It's really impressive. Now, Cons, you might... Yesterday, I had to leave our group chats because your opinions about the show were so fucking bad. I was like, these aren't even worth arguing about. So I already know I'm going to get triggered by Cons. So let's jump into the first episode. The initial scenes where they show like a little bit of flash forward of what it's going to be like, the CGI and how this was going to look. I was really impressed with how good it looked because you're not going to do real life shit in a series. You're not going to go up like they did in Top Gun Maverick and actually fly around and things like that. Was there anything, Chief, we'll start with you, anything from the first episode that really stuck out?
No, I thought it was kind of started a little bit slow as an episode, which Dave and I were talking about this yesterday, where he compared it to Currahee, the first episode of Band of Brothers, and I couldn't disagree more. I thought Currahee was like a perfect tone setter. It was almost like I compared it to like the Remember the Titans montage where they're all like getting ready in training camp and then they get ready to go. And it was like a full episode of that in my head. And you had Captain Sobel, who everybody like hated as a villain. Where it didn't quite.
There's nobody to hate.
Yes.
Nobody to hate, and there's also I didn't really fall in love with any of the characters either. Where it's like, the kid who plays Elvis, Barry Cohen, who I really like as an actor, although his Boston accent in this series really irks me.
Yeah.
A lot of people were upset with the accent stuff. I didn't care about that.
Barry Kagan, first of all, he's playing a character that's from New York, not Boston. And I couldn't put my finger on it right away. But then as I was watching, I was like, he sounds just like Grinelli.
Oh, he does sound. No wonder I fucking hate it.
Right?
Yes,
right?
He does sound a little. He's got a little Grinnell to him too. It's like a New York Boston Irish accent hybrid, and it's gross. It's distracting.
Right.
I found his accent distracting, which is sad because I've loved him in basically everything I've ever seen him in, with the exception of this. So, but it's one of those shows where I watched The Pacific also, and I thought there was a pretty big gap between The Pacific and Band of Brothers. I still watch it all the way through. I've rewatched The Pacific. I'm hoping that this is at least as good, but I'm having a little, I don't know, like I'm worried that it's not going to live up to the hype because I was very, very excited for this show.
All right, Dave, your initial impressions.
Like Chief said, when you're watching Band of Brothers for the first time, you're instantly introduced to Captain Sobel, and you instantly have someone to hate. That sets the tone for the rest of the series. But like, I'm watching this episode by episode right now. I didn't watch Band of Brothers live. I binge watched.
That's a big distinction, and I also think before,
right,
that's the third or fourth time we've said it. I think with this series, comparison is going to be the thief of joy. Like
I totally agree, completely agree with that. But like when I was watching Band of Brothers the first time, if I were watching it just Friday night by Friday night like this, I don't know that I would have been completely hooked after Curry after the first episode.
That's fair.
See, I really liked that.
It's an extremely necessary episode. Like it sets the scene. Like these guys all are banding together against that fucking
3 miles
right
up,
now.
3 miles down.
Yeah, the spaghetti, the trick he played with the spaghetti in the chow hall. It's like you fucking hated that guy, but I didn't necessarily gravitate towards anybody in particular. Not Captain or not Major Winter. Well, he was Lieutenant Winters at that point. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was Lieutenant Winters at that point, and
second lieutenant. Winters.
But then you get to the second episode, and they're dropping behind Normandy. So it's like you had that one episode of kind of setting the tone, but it wasn't necessarily like, holy shit, you have to watch this, you know?
Well, I'm pretty sure 60 people died in that first episode.
Of Band of...
Yeah, he's talking about Band of Brothers.
Oh, okay.
Masters of Air is like that too, like where it comes in. The thing that I thought the comparison, I was like, here we go. And I was a little disappointed at first when Gale doesn't drink too, like Winters, like a Quaker, and you have this guy straight-laced, doesn't gamble.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's a little too on the nose for me, like the comparison.
Like we've done that.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's something different about the military aspects. And I don't know if it's because I hadn't watched Band of Brothers in a long time or I hadn't thought about a lot of the things that are there. I thought they did an amazing job of capturing what it's like when you're about to like roll out and you're about to do combat actions.
Yeah.
Like I thought when they're standing, I mean, there's a point where the chaplain comes out, you know, and the chaplain's giving a prayer. Like when I was watching that, it gave me like chills thinking about it.
I got chills at least 8 times.
Too. I can't imagine
throughout that
you
first
and Hans,
episode.
Right.
Like what describe to me the feeling of what it's actually like. You're going into a mission and you know that you might not come back from that mission.
Yeah.
What's that feeling like that when it's coursing through your brain?
For me, like we would go out with 13 trucks is what we would go out with typically. And outside Camp Fallujah, there'd be like a sign that said, pay attention or you're going to fucking die, like whenever you're going out. And so you have everybody locked in. The battalion commander comes by and he's like, lock and load. You rack back and you're fucking ready to go, like whenever you're there. And then the chaplain usually will come and stand on one of the Humvees and do like this big prayer, like as like protection whenever you're going out. And then like if you're in a good spot, like my unit was a little bit different, got a little bit more leeway. Then the first squad leader would play "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor."
Let the bodies
every time.
Jesus Christ!
And
I was gonna ask. There's no like pregame warm up or?
Oh yeah, it's like a free throw line there because you have to.
Yeah, you got to get ready.
Do you guys
You
have
have
like
to.
headphones in and like you're playing your pump up music?
Yeah. I always had like, and I was telling people in the office the other day when I would walk out, I would always have like when I was looking for IEDs out in front, I would have my Zune in my pocket with one earphone and listening to Frank Sinatra and one listening to the comms that came in, and the Frank Sinatra just to keep me like calm whenever I'm walking, because you're by yourself, like looking for bombs, you're by yourself, and you're just like, the first couple times I was like, oh my God, like they're like, there's a hot spot up there. You're like, oh shit, I got the world on the string. So that's how it was.
I guess with that though, with 13 trucks, I rolled out with 4 trucks. That was my platoon. We had 4 trucks, right? And you get outside the wire, and the further you go, you realize you're just in the middle of nowhere. And I remember the third mission I ever went on was the first mission we got shot at, and it was scary because it was nighttime. And unless you're from a rural part of this country, I don't think people understand and appreciate what dark really looks like. When you can't really see your hand in front of your face, like if you put your hand out in front of your body and you can't really see it too well, that's dark. There's no ambient light in the middle of Iraq in the desert. There's no like major cities that you're going to get ambient light. Now, you might go out on missions where you get a full moon, so you get a good illum and you can see a little bit better. But I remember that first time going out at night. That was probably the most scared because you can't see anything. You don't know what's going to pop up. You can't see, is there something on the road that looks out of place that you might want to take a second look at before you continue on your route. So,
and I completely disagree. Like I would much rather operate under the cover of darkness. And my experience being outside at night, that's the only thing I did. I never did anything during the daytime. Whenever I came back, like my skin was so pale because I was never outside during the day. Like all we did is stuff at night.
Really?
I thought it was bright. Like there'd be nights out where I didn't even use night vision goggles because you could see so well. So I mean that could be
there
on
is something to what
Hans
is saying though, because like if you've ever been in like that level of darkness, it's scary even if you're not under threat of war. You know? Like it's just like, this is fucking scary, it's so dark. And so I can't even imagine the heightened sense when you're in like
and the reason why I like operating under the cover of darkness is when you're in a city situation and you have lights coming off of buildings, it affects how you could see in windows. It affects all those things. Like it makes you light blind coming out the other direction. So when you're operating under the cover of darkness, you're more likely to see a shadow like move up high. So whenever I would come in, I would have to have eyes on the building that we were approaching and on the ground that was in. I would have much rather done it in the evening time where nobody can
I think it's an important distinction to make that Chaps and I operated in two very distinctly different AOs, areas of operations. He was in an urban environment where I was in a rural environment, and I think that comes into play when you're talking about light versus darkness. And I can understand why you're saying that you'd rather operate in the cover of darkness, whereas with me, dude, I mean, one AO that I was in, there were vineyards all over the place and canals, tons of places for dudes to be hiding.
Yeah,
and then
Fallujah's
when I was
canal rich too. Like it's a very rural environment.
And then I'm out on the border of Iran, and I mean it's just flat as far as the eye can see. So at night, legitimately, a dude could be running up on you, and you might not see him unless you got night vision on. You're not going to see him until 10 feet away from you.
That's crazy.
So I think it's important to make that distinction.
Now that's exactly what they were arguing it when they got in the almost fist fight with the Brits.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because obviously both of you guys served, and I always wondered what the relationship like is between allies. Like, does each country have their own separate camp, and you guys just kind of make a pact like we're not going to kill each other, or are you guys like working out together? Are you guys on the same base?
It really kind of depends where you're at, like, and what you're doing. Like on a big base like Al-Assad or Baghdad, everybody's going to be in together. The smaller bases, like smaller little forward outposts, like you're going to be probably with only your country. Now, I will say there was a country that had it way better than us in every imaginable way, and that's Italy. Italy's MREs, you could eat them. If they served them here, like for lunch, like when Big Cat's ordering lunch for everybody, nobody would complain. You open it up, there's like wine and shit in it. It's like actually good pasta that they have. I would trade, like I would keep all my Skittles and shit from like our shitty MREs, and I would trade for like a thing of wine, and I would be like, oh my God, this 4 ounces of wine is so fucking good, man. That's what I thought.
Other countries are just very different in terms of just how they treat their armies and their militaries. I guess for lack of a better explanation, they treat them like adults. Like when
just
we
better.
Are deployed,
It's better overall.
There's no alcohol when we're deployed. So the movies you see from like Vietnam era, that there was alcohol there, that does not exist anymore. So
that's coming from an officer perspective. That is not true at all.
No, listen, I had NCOs who had alcohol, had access to alcohol. I'm saying it wasn't.
Yeah, like you go up from Forrest Gump and
option.
Like Lieutenant Dan and shit, they're like chugging beers together. Yeah. No, but whenever I was sitting, when I watched the Major get up on the plane and was drinking and throwing it out there, dude, whenever you're going through something like that and it's so extreme and you just lost a bunch of people, your faculties are just completely kind of gone for a little bit. Like the first time that you really lose people in combat, it fucks you up, man. Like I remember when I was 2 days in and one of my best buddies got killed by a rocket. And it was the first time that war was like real to me, like when I was on the ground. And you see that in the faces of the people in these planes. And I think that's what I really, really enjoyed about this is they didn't glamorize it. They didn't make it be like this is going to be an amazing adventure. They set the scene. This is going to be fucking brutal. And Cons and I got to go outside of Texas A&M, and there was a dude named Robert Sweat, 37 years old, or he was 97 years old when I went to go meet him. And he told me about his service, like what he did. And you know the dude that drops down and he's in the bubble?
Yeah.
Like
the turret
gunner, like that's underneath, the aerial gunner. That's what that guy did. He was shot down over France and was a prisoner of war for a while. And you look at what they did, and I remembered in the scene where the first guy drops down there and they close the door and he's inside the glass by himself. That has got to be the most terrifying thing. And I was watching it next to Dave, and I stopped it and like kind of took a step back and was like, I've never done a brave thing in my life.
So you say that, and that's wrong, obviously. Yeah. I'm watching that, and I think I said this last time I was on Zero Block 30, but there was, like, I struggled financially in college. I went to college way too expensive for me, so there was I was sitting in a recruiting office like, I'm just going to go fucking blow Iraqis' heads off. That was the sentiment back then, you know, in 2008. We spoke about that. And, like, looking back, I don't know if I could have done that because I'm just such a pussy.
No.
Like, I don't, like... No. I don't know that I could have.
You could have. And I think that
obviously you like it's trained into you, obviously, but like I don't know that I could have. Watching this shit and it's fake, you know?
Yeah.
Based on real events, but
or
fake.
even that scene where they're on a mission and the latch breaks and the glass is broken. So the guy is sitting in that thing. He's like freezing cold. Yeah. Like, and he has to like radio up to the cockpit, be like, "Can you get somebody down here to get me out of here? Like, I'm gonna freeze to death."
And it is like that. Like Cons, did you ride a C-17 whenever you went, or a C-5 whenever you went? So you get into a C-17, C-5. It's not like you're riding even Spirit fucking Airlines. Like, it's not like that at all. You don't have any of the creature comfort. So when you're up at 30,000 feet, you feel like you're at 30,000 feet, and it's cold as shit. Luckily for me, I was a dog handler and had a sleeping bag, so I'd be like, Psycha, get your ass in here, and me and Psycha would lay, and I would get his body heat, and it would be great. But you're
I mean,
negative
50
20
below 50 below zero is extreme. That's an extreme temperature to deal with. And then I mean, just being a turret gunner, and there's only, I don't know how thick that glass was, not that thick, but that's the only thing separating you between falling out of the plane and being shot by bullets.
I mean, think about how scary that thing is at Willis Tower. Like when you have to lean forward.
Oh, like maybe you would have been too much of a pussy.
Yeah. Nobody's
I'm not a heights guy anyways.
Yeah. Everybody's watching you and dependent on you in that plane. Like, if there's so many things that fall on you. And Robert Sweat said whenever they were picking out jobs that they brought all the different people, like all the different troops that were there. And they're like, we need people to be an aerial gunner. And, like, people threw up their hands. And the guy that was in charge was like, the average life expectancy for an aerial gunner is going to be about 13 to 20 seconds when you're actually in combat.
Oh, fuck.
And people still fucking had their hands in the air. And I was like, what were you thinking at that time?
They were young.
He was like, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go. And there wasn't a single spot during World War II that we knew was going to be a safe place.
Right. Dude, imagine just when you're in that, you're the, what do you call it? Aerial what?
Gunner.
Aerial gunner. And you're in that glass bubble and you're flying over and the flak starts. And it's like you have a first seat, front row view to the flak where you're just surrounded by these things exploding in the air next to you. And any one of those could just like be a direct hit and you're done. Like that has to be so fucking scary that I can't even imagine.
There's no cover. There's no cover.
Yeah.
There's no concealment.
There's nothing you can do.
Like I've been in spots where I'm ripping like a 249 saw. Like I'm on a roof like spraying. And even like at that moment, I'm like, like you're and you are behind a building where you have something that can kind of stop. There, you're not.
Right.
And you're in a plane that could fucking crash at any moment, man.
And that they didn't have like ejection seats at that time, I would imagine.
No, they did. They could jump, not necessarily eject, but there was especially when the back of the plane's fucking gone. Yeah. You have the ability to do it.
I thought one of the good things they did was when they had the piece of flak that went into the one plane and they showed you the size of a flak, a piece of metal. Yeah, that kind of gives you the perspective. But one thing, Chaps, you brought up when Dave asked you, like, what does it feel like? I was, but it stood out to me when the one, sorry, what are their names? Buck and Bucky. Yeah. Bucky didn't tell Buck what it was like, and he comes back after the first mission and he says, "You didn't tell me." And I think that was something that hit home for me, because I don't know about you, Chaps, but before I deployed, I talked to a bunch of friends and NCOs who had deployed before, and you can talk and talk and talk until you're blue in the face and have people tell you stories, but until you experience it for yourself, one, you can't fully appreciate it in terms of how you're going to react, and two, you don't know how you're going to perform. So I thought that was kind of very indicative of how things still happen today, that when it's crazy like that, maybe you're ripping in with a unit that you're taking over their AO, they're going to tell you what it's like, but until you start experiencing it for yourself, you can't fully appreciate it.
And I love that the perspective that the navigator gave in that, because everybody views World War II veterans, and largely rightfully so, as being like the greatest generation and like everybody's brave, but just flat out untrue. Like, there is no chance that everybody that goes is like the last action hero, right? Because the human nature was the same whenever Jesus was walking around, and it's the same way now. But having all those bombs that are going off, and you have this dude that's never been in that position, and you're navigating by compass and going over, I looked it up yesterday, going from Greenland to trying to land in London, because I didn't know like the specific places. But if you're 1 degree off on your calculation from the distance from Greenland to London, it's 450 miles off track that you would
That's
get
France.
just with that.
Yeah.
So whenever he sees it, and you're like, how the fuck does he end up there? Because
I had that reaction.
I had the exact reaction
he's
too.
1 degree off. And so then you see him puking his brains out and trying to do everything. Man, like, there's been firefights where people that you've looked at as like a complete badass, you just never know how you're going to respond until you're in that situation. And that's the reason why I don't believe any other military member is more special, even if you're a Medal of Honor recipient, whatever. Because I know for a fact that most people that are put in that position would do the same exact thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I never thought that I would be in a position to do something like that, and I honestly thought that I would freeze up, like, because I grew up super Christian. I was, like, going to seminary and all those things, and I didn't know how I would respond to it. And I responded decently, where I was able to calm things down, but there was moments where you're just like, I don't know. And putting that at 20,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and you see planes that are blowing up to your left and your right, and you still have to concentrate. Those dudes have been flying for like 6 months, and he landed in hurricane force winds on Greenland.
I think that's important to point out. Prior to this time period, our Army Air Corps was not very large. It was not an area of focus for our military, and they like bulked up and put a lot of planes into the rotation, got a lot of guys trained up, didn't have a ton of training. It wasn't like we had 20 years worth of aerial combat experience.
There weren't even 20 years worth of planes. Really.
Yeah, right. And how do those things fucking stay flying?
I don't know. They're too big.
And they take a lot of damage too, and I thought they would just crash like immediately.
Right, like
they're eating bombs through it. The engines are getting blown up and they're still able to fly. That's what shocked me. Like these guys are flying planes that have one engine working.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Like, I'm not a plane guy at all. So when I saw that, I was like, dude. And not just that. How the fuck did those crews get the planes back where they could fly again?
All right, so that's something I wanted to talk about, where they have the landing where they had no landing gear. So they land in the field, and they had that kid. I think they said he was like 19, and he was like the mechanic. And he's like, it's not as bad as it looks. I'm like, looks pretty fucking bad.
You're missing a quarter of the
yeah.
That seems
the
bad.
bottom of the plane is gone. Like,
Right.
looks pretty bad.
That looks pretty bad,
Yeah,
man.
but that just kind of tells you what like total war was, especially at that point before you probably had all like the manufacturing really humming in the United States. 'Cause I think this was 42 or 3 when that
Three.
So
Yeah,
like we were still at that point. It's still like the ramp up phase, and so it's not like you just had a plane coming off the conveyor belt every minute. So it's like, hey, we don't have a choice. We got to find a way to fix this. It's all hands on deck. It's fucking weld some scrap metal on there and get that thing flying again. So that part to me was something that never really didn't occur to me, I guess, through all like the history stuff I read. It was like, hey, we better our only option is to fix that. It's like they talk about it like my dad used to fix like his push mower.
Right.
You know, like
The chicken wire.
yeah, just like wrap popsicle sticks
and
and
light bulb, like putting a fuse in.
right, yeah. So that was really like I don't know. I had to take a step back at that scene where it's like, yeah, just and then when you go through that, like can you imagine, like we went through this mission, there's flak fucking everywhere, we're seeing planes drop, we have to do a landing where the bottom of our plane gets fucked up, and like it's fucked up because it wasn't working right the first time. It's like, hey, all you guys get right back in that same plane. That is, I'd be like, fuck you. Like, I am not get me a different plane.
To me, that's one of the craziest things about World War II battles. Like us, for me, I basically stayed in the same spot. Like I was fighting Fallujah. When we've talked to there's another World War II veteran we talked to, Stanley Rubin. He fought in Iwo Jima. But he also fought in Guadalcanal. He also fought in Okinawa. Like, he fought all over the Pacific. And you look at these battles, and you're like, oh, well, you fought in Normandy. And then they went on and fought in the other war, like in the other battles, the other battles. And it's like, Jesus, man. Like, it didn't stop for those folks. And you look at some of those missions where you lose 60 people, a day and a half later, you're back flying. Like, it doesn't... You went to school with these people, you've flown with them, you've known them for about a year and a half now. You saw a bunch of them die in one day. You have to put it completely to the side and march to the sounds of the guns again. Fucking crazy.
Yeah,
Nuts.
I pointed this out before, and I certainly did in the blogs, but the resolve that these men had, when we deployed, it was for a finite amount of time. You knew you were either going in the Marines 6 months, in the Army 12 or 15 months, and that was it. Like, okay, I know where the light at the end of the tunnel is, and I can act accordingly and focus on what I have to get done and get myself there. These men, using Stanley Rubin as the example, they just kept fighting. They had no idea. It was basically, hey, I'm here until this thing ends or I die.
Yeah.
There's no like, hey, cool, I'll be home for Christmas this year. They just didn't know. So to have that resolve,
that's nuts.
One, to continue to fight, but then, also to be able to compartmentalize with all of the horror and the death that they experienced. And not to mention, I guess in this show, these guys got pretty cushy quarters. I mean, you're seeing firsthand why we give pilots across all branches a hard time, because, I mean, they're going home to a nice setup. They're going to the bar at night. Not bad, versus Band of Brothers, Easy Company, they're just sleeping out in the woods.
Scenes and then being like, they had it easy.
want-
It's crazy. That's a crazy take. These people that are having artillery go up in the air while they're flying have no way to really dodge it like a fighter pilot would. And
What'd you say the life expectancy was? 13 seconds?
13 to 19 seconds for those people.
Yeah.
So are those bar scenes realistic, or is that kind of just like Hollywood?
It's very realistic for the time period.
Okay, so during World War II.
I also thought the crazy thing, like in maybe non-military, they're fucking wearing their service uniforms, like out, like they're suits. Like
I think, chaps, that's just a time gone by. That's just not something that's as normal for us. But I think that was
not
much
normal.
more-
Ain't nobody even brought them.
Those suits are fucking hot. I would wear those all the time.
Oh yeah, they're back too. Like those ones are
I've
back.
seen
the
them,
pink
yeah.
and greens. They're fucking
They're
fire.
why would you not wear those?
They're the
You
best
look
service
sharp in
uniforms.
those.
They're way better than the Marines. The Marines have the best dress uniforms, and the Army now is the best service uniform. And it's not up for debate. Like I don't think that's a debate that anybody that's honest in the military would say that for sure. What are you guys hoping to see? Are you hoping to like relationally to be developed in the show, or you want more combat?
That's the best part to me about Band of Brothers is you actually care for each and every character, and I love how they separate each episode from a different character's point of view, and you feel for them and you relate to them and you want them to get to the finish line and capture Berlin.
Well,
and
how much do you feel about that specific thing is because in Band of Brothers, they had the ability to talk to the actual people.
That helps absolutely.
Whereas now they don't have that.
I don't know if that I loved that element of Band of Brothers. I don't know.
I didn't realize it till at the end either. When they started putting the names up, I remember I don't know when I first watched it, but I remember being at the end like, how the fuck did I miss that these are the real people that are talking here?
That's Dick Winters? Yeah, but I was going to bring this up before when Cons was talking about like the light at the end of the tunnel, where at the end of Band of Brothers, it's like the point system. And it's like, you just fucking defeated Hitler. You've been there for 4 years if you started in Africa, or 3 years if you were in part of Normandy. And it's like, you finally relax a little bit. It's like, actually, you're going to be needed to go invade mainland Japan.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck? Like, send these guys home. Like, I remember being genuinely happy as if I knew the person when they pulled, I can't remember the character's name. They pulled us
out of the
Swifty.
hat.
Swifty.
And
Swifty
rigged
won the.
it. Shifty Powers.
Shifty Powers, and they set the raffle or the lottery, rigged it for him so he can go home. And it was like, he deserves
you do a little
fist
bump.
like you felt good for him, but you wanted everybody to go home.
Right.
Like that scene where Winters, they're playing baseball in Austria, and Winters stops the game. He's like, we're going home.
Yeah.
Like Japan surrender, war's over. And
but even then, they're like, I don't know if they wanted to leave because it was institutionalized almost,
No, they went back. Like you could see, they're already starting to what was the Jewish guys like? I'm gonna marry a big titted Jewish lady and drive a cab in San Francisco. They were allowing themselves to dream in the way that they were. No one was talking about the future when they were in Bastogne, right? So it was like you get to the end. And it's like, man, these guys are going to have to, now they're going to make these guys sail across the world to go invade Japan. Like that felt wrong. And I didn't get that same level of connection where I was rooting for the characters in the Pacific for whatever reason. And just judging by the trailer, it feels like we're going to get little mini episodes. It seemed like they're going to do something about the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes.
Which it's almost like, do a whole series about them.
I agree with that.
And split it up different way. So I don't know how many different arcs and units they're going to cover in this thing. I haven't really researched the show, but I wish that they were doing the 10-part series on just the people we started with.
Yeah.
Well, I think they are. It's sticking with the bloody 100th. So I think
there might be I think that there's going to be cameos of other big units, but it's going to primarily focus
on these
there.
Guys. Okay.
One other aspect that blew my mind militarily whenever I was watching it, being in that same being the aerial gunner and having to look out for fighter pilots from other from the Nazis, that is not something that anyone in Iraq or Afghanistan fought there had to ever deal with.
Yeah.
We always had air
superiority.
We came in, shock and awe, destroyed everything that they had. There was no military left. Having enemy aircraft overhead has got to be fucking terrifying, because when you're on the ground, there's not shit you could do.
No.
You're just a sitting ass duck. And not just that, being a ground person, I never really thought about what it would be like for a non-fighter pilot to be engaged by a fighter pilot. Fighter pilots have the ability to circle around real fast, have their heat-seeking missiles, do all that shit. When you're in a B-17, you don't have that skill.
You're on a vector.
You're on a straight line.
How fast other planes were going.
When they
Man?
when they realized they were about to fly over France airspace.
Oh yeah.
They showed the view. It seemed like it could have been miles behind the planes, and just how long it took those planes to turn around.
Turning a ship.
Probably fucking miles and miles just to turn.
Because remember the one they said that one plane crashed because they tried to bank too hard.
Yeah.
And so you have to have the wherewithal to fly a plane, even though you've been only flying for less than a year. You have to fly it with all of your men in the back, and you know that their lives depend on you. You have to be able to keep eyes ahead to know that if you need to veer a little bit left or right, depending on where you're going. And you have to be able to direct fires, give it up, and be in control and comms with the other planes that are behind you, the other planes that you're commanding, headquarters down below. It's so many things for a 21-year-old to do.
It's
so
crazy.
Many things.
I got a question.
3 years younger than you, Nicky. Can you imagine?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's fucking nuts.
We're all pussies, right?
Yeah, no, big, 100%.
I got a question for you guys though. That scene where, they'd gone over France by accident, and he comes down and he's getting questioned about what happened, and he's like, "Hey, we had a mechanical failure," and like covered for his guy. Mm-hmm. How much of that is, for lack of a better word, allowed or goes on where like somebody fucks up in your unit, but you're just like, when you have to do your official report, you just kind of sweep it under the rug?
For me, a lot of it depends on who it was and what their skill set is. Like, because you have some that are more equipped to understand that they made a mistake and move on. And if you have somebody that's shit hot that made that kind of mistake, you're going to give them another chance. But if you have somebody like the navigator, if he would have done something like that multiple times, you got to kick him out.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lives are in their hands.
Yeah. Situationally dependent. I mean, after every mission too, you have to come back and write an after action report. I had to write it. So it was up to me to determine what I was going to say. No one was out there with us, so I could say whatever I wanted to say. So a lot of times too, you just didn't want to necessarily. I don't want to say deal with the headache, but it was like, is it worth saying that this person screwed up, or is this something that I can get corrected and work with my
on your
NCOs
own,
and we can get it corrected on my own?
Because you trust your own leadership
abilities
abilities too.
Yeah.
Like you know when something has to go higher than you, and you know when something like, and if it's borderline, I'm gonna report. Like, because I was just a enlisted dude, so if it was borderline, I was going to report it for sure. I also, watching the show, got a little emotional about the aspect of the family, like Gale putting his girlfriend or wife or whatever the relationship is, because that was so common. Like, you take off your Kevlar and you had, like, I had a picture of Kelsey in there, and it does make you realize like what you're kind of there for, what you're not even there for, because even in the moment, and I think that this is something that most people probably don't get, when you're there, you're not, in my estimation, Cons, you can say if you feel the same way. Once I was on the ground and we were conducting missions, I didn't have America in mind. All I had was, I want to get back, and I want everybody here to get back to the fort. Other than that, I don't give a fuck. Like, politics be damned. Who the president is, who a senator is, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what any of those people are saying. All I care about is putting rounds accurately into the enemy. That's it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You just make yourself nuts if all you're thinking about is home all the time and making yourself homesick. I can't imagine that would go over well in your brain each and every day. I would obviously take time to escape. I mean, Iraq is when I discovered Barstool, the blog, way back when. So, I mean, like, I look forward to it from that aspect. But even that didn't feel like that was home. That was just something on the internet. So it wasn't until I got towards the end when I started thinking about, like, all right, I think I'm going to get home. We'll be all good. I'm bringing all my guys home. All right, maybe I can organize a welcome home party and we can celebrate a little bit. But even that, I mean, I put a date out there, but you didn't want to get too far into the weeds and the details.
Chickens.
Yeah, it is counting chickens for sure.
Yeah. Shut up, Dave. You don't know what you're talking about.
But it's hard.
I absolutely
I just said I didn't go too far into the details, you jamoke.
You said a date. I would be like,
I said a date. That was it.
That's kind of jinxing it for me.
One other aspect that I really enjoyed about the show too is, Chief leaving made me lose my train of thought. Oh, so whenever they're all getting together, when they're in the mission brief and they move back the map and they find out where they're going to go, it reminded me of like Selection Sunday, where you have fucking Villanova and they pull it back and they're like, East bracket, fuck yeah.
I was going to ask you about that because that first mission, they pulled it back and they're all like, oh, fuck this. Like, they just knew they were fucked. And then the second one, they all got fired up. So have you had something like that where they show you and you're like, oh, goddamn, like this could get fucking ugly?
Sort of. So as dog handlers, we didn't go as like a full-ass unit. Like Cons would go with the company, his whole-ass company that he was with and trained with. Dog handlers, we would bring 40 or 50 at a time, and then as soon as you got there, the units would kind of discuss who's going to go where. So it was like that when you wanted to find something, and it was odd. Like, it goes against what you would normally think. Like, if you got a spot that was really safe and you're just doing like entry control point shit with your dog, like looking at different meal trucks that are different semi trucks that are coming on base, nobody wanted to do that because it was boring. But if you got a chance to go with like with recon or the SEALs or something like that, everybody was like, oh fuck yeah. So when it would almost like they released the name, it was like a high school play, or like if you're going to get on the high school like basketball team and you go like find your name, like what unit am I going to be with? And then people be like, God damn it, man. Yeah. I didn't come here to go to fucking Crete. like I wanted to go to Fallujah or Ramadi or something like that.
How quickly does that sentiment or feeling change, or does it at all?
It changed for me.
I'm sure there's like all these kids are 18, 20, 22 years old. They're all young, full of piss and vinegar, cocky assholes, Is it like, oh, that first mission, they make it back and it's like, okay, now I understand we're not here for fun,
It's kind of like Gale, right? Cons, like you don't know you don't know what's ahead of you until it's ahead of you. Like you really have no idea kind of what to expect on a combat.
Yeah, you can't predict how you're gonna. I've told this story before too. My best soldier, who I thought was gonna be amazing, this PFC. And the first time we got shot at, the dude froze. He just stood there and froze to the point where I had to grab him and put him on the ground or he would have gotten shot. I never would have predicted he would have acted like that. So I don't think you can honestly answer that question until you're actually in it.
I can imagine getting shot at. Sorry, my bad. I was just thinking about that.
No, it's okay.
No, it's crazy. Like one thing that sticks out to me too is like, so for instance, I saw a tweet yesterday that it was the first flight, like the Wright brothers, and it was the screenshot of that weird looking plane with all the two wings and shit. And then 60 years later, or whatever it was, Neil Armstrong on the moon. And now we're 60 years beyond that. Technologically, we have gotten so much more advanced than we were 60 and 100 plus years ago, 80 years for World War II. Yet, like, I'm looking at what's going on in Eastern Europe right now, and I've talked to you about this a little bit, Cons. Tactically, at least from my completely untrained eye, it doesn't look like much has changed. They have fucking trenches. They have fucking artillery. They have, like, it's wild that even though the technology has gotten, like, it's the best it's ever been in the history of the world, we're still employing those tactics, at least not us yet, as far as NATO's concerned. But like they're doing that in Eastern Europe right now, and that to me is wild, watching these guys in these fucking like these rusty ass super fortresses, but they're still in trenches. Like it doesn't compute in my head why this kind of warfare is still like alive and well.
They're not in trenches in areas of urban development,
right?
And that won't ever change unless you're doing indiscriminate bombing like the Brits were, when that's what they talked about, where you're just dropping stuff, and that's not something that like NATO wants to do at this point, anybody in NATO. So I think that plays a lot like up, and I think drones have changed that
completely. Like I sent him videos. Cons is different because I like to shit on Cons. You have a different experience as you got shot out in Cons. I'm not trying to downplay your combat experience at all. He got shot. So like I've seen videos just of what's going on in Eastern Europe that I've wanted to send you and be like, yo, look at this, but they are fucking gnarly. It's
No, I don't care about that.
no, I mean I don't know, I don't want to arouse any old memories or anything.
Dude,
you know,
I have some military podcasts. I look at that shit every day.
Well, I will show you some of it, but they are literally getting out of fucking armored vehicles, like just 12 guys, and just fucking blasting away in these trenches. They're wearing GoPros, so it's a first-person view of raiding trenches, like it's all along or all quiet on the Western Front.
You know,
it is fucking wild to me. It's fucking wild to me.
I was just gonna say, I mean, Dave, to your question, fundamentals are fundamentals for a reason, right?
That's what we talked about, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we adjust how we operate, but a lot of it is still based in fundamentals. Using like football as an example, like
that's
obviously
a good
offenses
analogy.
today are different than they were in 1993.
You're still passing the ball and running the ball.
Right. A lot of fundamentals are still the same, and it's the same in the military. You adjust, and then also, it's weird. You play this like cat and mouse game with your enemy, where you do things a certain way. Your enemy adjusts how they go and defend against your tactics, and then you adjust based on how they've adjusted, and round and round you go. And it's kind of like an endless loop, and we saw that a lot in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we changed how we operated day to day over the course of that 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's interesting. But all of those things were all still based in fundamentals.
Yeah, and like going back to it was the Carentan episode of Band and Brothers. There and the postscript of that episode, and it's cool. And I think Band of Brothers did. I mean, you guys can speak to this much better than I can. I think from again my untrained eye, they were so specific in the communication standards that Easy Company had in that when they were storming those trenches in Carentan, France. Like the camera work and like Winners and whoever was saying, hey, you go here, and it was fucking perfect. And at the end of that episode, it's like we still use these tactics today.
Yeah, and you saw a lot of the same thing in Masters of the Air, like when the commander is telling them, stay on my wing, stay in a tight formation, and then reading back like where you're gonna be, going back and kind of being upset with the people that. Figuring out why the fuck you were so far behind. That's legit. All that stuff is legit. To close up shop, Nick, what do you want to see in episode 3?
I kind of want to just see more of, I'm pretty sure it's Bucky. Yeah, I want Bucky more like in the air a lot more and kind of just see, because the whole time he was kind of like begging to be in the action, and now that he's going to be constantly in there.
Better be a badass, right?
Yeah, I want to see him be like that guy.
Yeah, he needs to be that dude, or you're gonna be like, what a fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
the kind of the Wild Bill of the group, I guess.
What about you?
Besides
good accents.
The voices are bothering me, and that's also a me thing. Like in Chernobyl, that miniseries, that's fucking Ukraine, and they had English accents. The show is fantastic. That part bothered me to no end. Find Eastern Europeans. I'm sure there's plenty of actors in fucking.
Want me to Caribbean?
Just the accents drove me crazy, and that goes movie to movie for me. I want to relate to the characters. I want to feel like when Wild Bill Guarnier got his leg blown off, like I was gutted. You know, happy he's going home now, but not that he did, because he stayed around. But like I don't know that I have that yet. But going back, like I don't know that I had that after Kirky at the same time. You know. But I'm interested to learn more. Like I got early onset Republican, like we've talked about ad nauseum over the last couple months. So I'm just excited to learn. Like I don't know a whole lot about the Tuskegee Airmen. They've teased that.
I don't know what the Republican thing had to do with anything.
That it's a joke. it's a Shane Gillis joke. It's a stand-up.
Oh, that's right.
When you get to the 30s, you just become a history nerd. If you're
True. What about you, Cons?
I'm waiting for this show to get good, because right now I don't think it's very good.
I'm leaving the chat again.
No. Let me. I've sat here for 45 minutes. At least let me talk about my gripes here. Don't get me wrong. The CGI and the ability to show how these missions were conducted, that's all very cool. I think the acting is so poor and the accents are so bad, it's distracting to the point where I
agree with Cons in that.
I don't like the show right now.
Austin Butler
and here's the other
is
thing.
too hot, and he's not a good actor. It's a bad combo.
He's not at all. He acts like he's trying to be an actor.
Yes,
if that makes sense.
Yes, I agree with Khan's vehemently for the first time
dramatic.
Ever. Right now. Yes,
the dialogue I don't believe is realistic. There was one line in the second episode. Why didn't you agree with him? Didn't like his delivery. No one talks like that. Even in World War II, no one talked like that.
I disagree. Those letters.
For the dramatic scene.
We've read
I'm not
so
done.
many
I'm not
letters.
done. I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm not done.
Cut him off.
Listen. It is not doing a good job already. 2 episodes in, developing the characters. And here's a big challenge. Half the episode, you have these people's face covered. To act with just your eyes is incredibly difficult. You saw Tom Hardy do it brilliantly in Dunkirk. It's not easy to do. I don't think these actors have the chops necessary to do it. I'm hoping it gets better, but right now this show is not very good.
I can get past, so long as the story's good enough, I can get past the shitty acting, because as soon as I saw Austin Butler as cast as the lead, I'm like, that doesn't do it for me.
I guess I don't care about the shitty acting thing because that's how I envision people from the 1940s. I mean, we've read so many love letters from like World War II coming back, and they're like, see,
they're
like we're doing a little bit of
polished.
smacking
No,
here.
Chad,
You just made a fucking Shane Gillis joke from the exact same without even realizing it.
Really?
That's what we're talking about. With
but that's what they do. Like,
that's
if you're like, that's not the way they talk, fuck, yes, it was.
That's what it was, yeah.
No, it wasn't. Chaps, they're so dramatic.
Dude,
in all
read
of their
one
delivery.
letter, Cons. Read one letter.
Oh, my God.
I'll read one. I'll pull it
God.
up from George H.W. Walker. or H.W. Bush. He said the exact same. The way that they talked was fucking weird. Like, that's the language and lexiconology and colloquialisms all changed.
They all
I'm talking
evolve,
about how these actors are trying to act. They're not good at it.
I agree with him. They're not good actors.
And I'm saying I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care about
I can get past
care.
that. I'm on your side there, but I agree with
I don't need it to be Joaquin Phoenix.
It doesn't. But like you got Ron Livingston. Ron Livingston was a guy from Office Space in Band of Brothers. Like, he was perfectly fine, you know? Damien
Yeah,
Lewis.
I mean, is the acting as good as it was in Band of Brothers? No. To me, it doesn't just... Were you watching it and like... Oh,
no,
man.
when it comes to movies and TV shows, of me being a critic, I'm the cheapest date there is. Like, I can't tell you what's good acting, what's bad acting. Like, I just want a good storyline that I could follow and like feel somewhat connected to.
I feel like most people, if you go in with the expectation that it's going to be Band of Brothers, I don't give a fuck if it was better than Band of Brothers. There's nobody in the world that's going to admit that it was better than Band of Brothers.
That's true.
I think that Band of Brothers, and we've done it this entire time that we've been talking, the comparison. It's just, if you take in a vacuum these episodes, it was way better acted than even like the Medal of Honor series that everybody
that thing's
liked.
cheesy as fuck.
Right.
That's
like
just
every
throw it
show.
on.
That's like saying...
You're not going to be able to do.
But this is Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg.
The well-acted military movies are so few and far between. Like, you have some good ones that are like We Were Soldiers. We have Saving Private Ryan. You have those types.
Black Hawk
But a
Down.
vast majority of military shows are so cheesy. One won an Oscar for Best Picture in Hurt Locker, and it's the cheesiest,
I hate that movie.
poorest
sucked.
acting of all time to win an Oscar.
That's like my least favorite war movie ever.
That one won an Oscar. So I don't think that having good acting or weird dialogue, like the dialogue in Hurt Locker was fucking terrible, but people really liked it. I think it's going to be the same thing for this, and I think it's going to be something that I really look forward to see how it develops and on. I do wish that it all was dropped at one time.
Here's the last thing I can say about this series. I think this is the worst thing you can say about a series. I think this is going to be a series that most people watch once, put it down, and never watch again.
I hope that's not the case, but I feel
like that's probably true. Because
that's what it was for the Pacific for me.
But I also think that won't be true for people that this is their first step in that. Like, I think our generation, especially since the timing of Band of Brothers was right around 9/11, they had to delay it because of 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Patriotism, like traditional patriotism, was alive and well, more so at that point.
We were talking
so when
about
you're
that,
watching the greatest generation off the back of 9/11, everything else is going to pair in comparison.
I don't know. I think there's people who watch Band of Brothers now and don't take that context and still love it. I think plenty of people watched it post 9/11. I didn't watch it when it was live because I had to go to college. We didn't have HBO at my school.
Where did you go to
so
college?
I never watched it.
Where did you go? Where did you go?
Oh, okay. I went to West Point. No big deal. Okay. But no, so I don't think that plays a part. I think that and Chaps, you're right. I do think you should just let this show stand on its own. I think Hanks and Spielberg are really producers in name only. They're not really. They don't have their fingerprints on this so far in these 2 episodes.
Fuck.
And we'll see. We'll get into it. They got to go. We got to give up the studio. We'll be back next week. Maybe the same cast of characters here. Maybe not. I'll have some other different people. And I'm looking forward to it. We'll see you back here next week to talk about episode 3.
Cool.
See you then.
Yes, sir.